Okay, welcome back to the United Pubcast, the podcast of the official Man United Supporters Club here in Sydney for your latest episode. And Larry, something, I wouldn't say a little bit different, something we've been touching on for the past 10 years, but it is just as relevant now because obviously Manchester United are in not a great position. And we've seen one of our rivals, I don't know what we call Chelsea as a rival or as a weird situation with Chelsea, but obviously the ownership situation there looks like it is going to change. We didn't see that sort of coming 2 or 3 weeks ago. But football does change quickly. So it puts focus. Okay, that's Chelsea's situation, but it does put the focus solely back on Manchester United and the ownership situation and the position we find ourselves in and the players' responsibility. You look at the players copping so much criticism at the moment, and rightly so. But then we're going to get into the debate, is that fair? Should the criticism be directed elsewhere, where in June, July and August it always is, but during the season we direct it at the players. So before all that, Larry, how's things, mate?
Good. Lots to debate, lots to discuss. What did you think of my Ronaldo video the other day? Do you tend to agree with me or disagree with me? Obviously, I did that one solo, so I'm yet to get your opinion, Tom.
Look, I agree with that point, and you know my opinion on stats. So I agree with the point in regards to he's never actually been that clinical. Like, while he's the greatest goal scorer of all time, it's crazy to think that he's not a clinical striker. He has so many chances at Real Madrid. He used to have 10, 15, 20 shots a game. One went in, so okay, he scored the winner, fantastic match winner by Ronaldo, but ultimately he is very wasteful in front of goal. But if you're going to score 800 goals, well, okay, that's the price you're going to pay.
Absolutely. I'll give you a modern example. Harry Kane currently has, I want to say, 5 goals in the Premier League. Up until about a week ago, he had taken something around 77 shots this season, 5 goals. Yeah. So it just shows, if you can have opportunities, you can still be a good goal scorer. Harry Kane is renowned as one of the best goal scorers in the Premier League, if not modern football. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So it just shows that Raheem Sterling, another one. Now, Raheem Sterling's an interesting one. He's actually been more clinical this season based on previous seasons. But this is someone who returns 20 goals regularly for the last 5 years. So it just shows if you have constant opportunity or you're given constant chances, you will score. Even someone as awful as me, Tom. You give me 20 chances, I should hopefully score one.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Emad, good mate of ours, wasn't impressed with the Ronaldo stats, but I hope you're well, Emad. Hope the little one is keeping well. But speaking, you mentioned Harry Kane there, and obviously we're going to get into a completely different topic, but you mentioned Harry Kane, and we tie that into Cristiano Ronaldo at the moment. I'm not going to say it, Larry, but there is a chance. I don't think it'll happen, but there's a chance he's going to be linked with Manchester United, and I'm sure they will be in the discussion. Because Harry Kane, obviously, Spurs are still Tottenham Hotspur, so he's still going to want out of that club, in my opinion. So it will be interesting. I think Harry Kane to Manchester United will heat up in the coming weeks, rightly or wrongly. I do think that'll happen. But we'll say good day to a few guys in the chat. Matt, always good to see you, mate. Appreciate the support. Evening, Rob. Hope you're recovering well. A little bit of a knee injury, but seems all in good spirits. Josh, is always good to see you, mate. George, hey lads, good evening. Always, mate. And is the Christmas tree back up? What is that behind you, Larry? Is that a new version of a Christmas tree?
No, I'm sorry to disappoint, Josh. It's just a regular fake plant that I have in my house.
Well, we'll get into it, a fake plant. Well, can you maybe put the Christmas tree back up if one Matter scores a goal? Maybe that can be the deal before the end of the season.
No problem.
So we'll get into a few things. Obviously,
we get top 4. How's that?
Okay, I think the Christmas tree likely will be staying down now, but it's a weird one. Now, we'll get it. I think the Chelsea discussion will sort of naturally flow into some of the topics we sort of bring up. But we'll try and leave the Chelsea stuff towards the end and maybe one or two situations around Roman Abramovich and what it means for Manchester United. But we've done a couple of videos in the last couple of days on who is to blame, who's at fault. And as I said, during the season, and again, a lot of this is rightly so, a lot of that criticism, a lot of the blame is directed solely at the players because they're the ones who have to take responsibility. However, I wanted him on for this chat. I'm sure he'll come on at another stage in terms of you won't find someone who agrees more than me in regards to players need to take responsibility. Look at my position I took when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was getting so much criticism. I said, forget Solskjaer, this is on the players. However, at the end of the day, Larry, our players have been have been failing ultimately for a decade. I'm just thinking, okay, we've had good players and bad players. Ultimately, they've failed for a decade. And I'm just thinking, why is that the case? Because they're not failing at other clubs for a decade. They're getting things right. They might go through cycles where one or two things don't work and they have a bad season here or there. But ultimately, they do sort of fall on something that sort of resembles some type of success. Manchester United's doing that. And there's no doubt we have quality. Here we were at the start of the season saying we could potentially win the Premier League, potentially win the Champions League with the quality we have. So we have the quality. Ultimately, the players are failing. So you can put it down. Okay, this batch, they're no good. Okay, they don't have the mentality. A decade of having the wrong mentality? Well, I just don't understand why these players are constantly making the same mistakes and failing. And if that is the case, you do have to look at why that is. Like, who's bringing them to the club and why are they bringing them to the club?
I think, and you'll find as part of this conversation that you cannot put the blame solely into one area. It doesn't add up. I take your point on, yes, absolutely. Over the last decade, the players have fallen short. Now it's been a lot of players. It's been a lot of players over the last decade. You could even argue it's players who have won previously who have failed to replicate that sort of form season on season. Ultimately, Tom, the top falls. I mean, shit rolls downhill, as they say. It starts from the top. I do think that with the current caliber of players, there is an argument to say if they were held to a higher account, perhaps they give you a greater level of performance. In a small example, we look at Luke Shaw. When he was placed under pressure by Brendan Williams, that seemed to kick him in a gear. And the Alex Telles signing definitely got a reaction out of the Englishman. And I just wonder if they have that accountability on a day-to-day basis. Now, as much as I liked Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and you would have seen the Norwegian in the thumbnail, the thing that Ole seemed to project was he always took the blame. He never held players accountable, which some might say is admirable. Even Sir Alex Ferguson called out players every so often. Now, Jose Mourinho, probably the extreme prototype of that, where you're probably saying it's a stretch too far. But there's no right or wrong decision. The other thing is, and I guess if you were going to compare to, say, Sir Alex's time, this is the argument I guess I'll make, whether it's the player's fault or not. The counter argument would be when a player fell out of line, Sir Alex Ferguson got rid of them fairly quickly. But the difference is, and ultimately what I think is the issue at Manchester United, now whose fault this is, I'm not too sure. Sir Alex Ferguson was the manager, he was the head coach, he was the director of football, he was the lead scout. He had his finger in every pie at that football club. In fact, it's famously known now that he basically revolutionized the way Manchester United do scouting when he first took over in 1986. So I then ask you, if you look at Manchester United's current structure over the last 12 months, John Murtough, a recent appointment as football director or sporting director, his title something along those lines. Darren Fletcher, sporting director. Now, granted, Ralf Rangnick doesn't seem to know what Darren Fletcher actually does day to day, but they've implemented that structure. So fair play. You've seen a head of scouting appointed. Now, this started years ago with Nicky Butt's position. I know Nicky Butt has since left the club, but my point is, I think Manchester United are getting to the point where they've realized actually Sir Alex Ferguson was so influential in every single aspect, where in fact maybe football has evolved and Manchester United have been left a little bit behind. Maybe we're suffering from our past success where it took us to this point to realize maybe you need specialists in all these positions as opposed to looking for that one manager to do basically everything.
Oh, it's not a question that football has moved on. You look at this. Look at the two longest-serving managers and the two. Well, actually, Pep Guardiola probably goes into the discussion now as the second best Premier League manager. But I think whenever we rate Premier League managers, it's Sir Alex Ferguson and Arsene Wenger. I think that's just in terms of the way we're brought up. I think actually looking at the facts now, Pep Guardiola has definitely surpassed Arsene Wenger. But let's say the two greatest managers in Premier League history, Arsene Wenger and Sir Alex Ferguson. Yeah, different time. They had the complete run of those clubs, and that is why they dominated and they were so successful. And you could argue Pep Guardiola does have full run of Manchester City. Now, obviously, there is a full football department, sort of a well-structured department behind him, but that's in place because of Pep Guardiola and what they've seen the benefits from how Barcelona are run. So you can see, complete dominance in what has been Arsene Wenger, Sir Alex Ferguson, and Pep Guardiola is giving the manager full control. And the managers now just simply haven't had that control. David Moyes actually probably had too much control. He came in and they tried to keep things very similar to Sir Alex Ferguson, and it didn't quite work in terms of giving the manager everything. But there needs to be that little bit of balance. Louis van Gaal, you could tell he wanted some players, they didn't come in. He wanted this player, they got another player, and he was sort of publicly not happy with that. Jose Mourinho, we all know the circumstances there, and Solskjaer was just used as a punching bag for the Glazers. He was put in there. The Glazers knew exactly what they were going to get. But I just want to bring it back to the players. And when Ronaldo misses a shot on goal, that's not the board, that's not the owners, that's not the manager. When Harry Maguire misplaces a back pass or a header and the striker goes in and scores, That's nothing to do with the board, the owner, or the manager or his teammates. That's simply on the player. And again, that is where I sit here and say the player needs to take full responsibility. But I don't see these constant failures at other clubs. Like if Harry Maguire went to a Chelsea or Ronaldo went to a Liverpool or Fred went to Manchester City, which he was heavily linked with at the time, they'll be successful. Well, we know that. But we know when a player comes to Manchester United, we think, yeah, he's a good player. We get excited. That's what fans do. But ultimately, we know in 3 years' time, we're going to be having the same debates. Oh, why do we sign this player?
See, that's the thing. You make an interesting point there, but I actually tend to disagree. So when you say when Ronaldo takes a shot, that's not on the board. When Harry Maguire misplaces a pass, that's not on the board. Well, you could make the argument that it fundamentally is on the board, and I'll explain to you why. The thing is, Tom, Manchester United have really struggled for an identity. Let me just paint you the picture, and you and I have had this discussion on this podcast before. When Ole Gunnar Solskjaer first took over, let's go back to season 1920, his first full season in charge. He signs Harry Maguire and he signs Aaron Wan-Bissaka for a combined £140 million, or approximately that amount, okay? Manchester United at the time were a counter-attacking football side. Now, when you're a counter-attacking football side, a right-back who has phenomenal timing in terms of one-on-one defending is perfect. When you have a defender who has, well, extremely powerful in terms of his attributes, heading ability, physicality, perfect for a centre-back. Lacks pace, well, that's not really an issue when you're a counter-attacking side. You got all the protection in the world. The problem we've seen, though, and now whether this is, now, does this fall on Ole? Does that fall on the board? Is that due to not having a football director who didn't implement or set the identity, no matter who the manager is? I'm not sure. But my point to you is, what we've seen under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer this season compared to 2 seasons ago, why is Harry Maguire misplacing that pass? Or why does he suddenly look like a shadow of an £80 million defender? The facts are we evolved our playing style. Now, if you were always set up to be a counter-attacking side, I still think Harry Maguire would look at him and be like, he's a great defender for Manchester United. The problem is the way we play has evolved in the time that he's signed. So Harry Maguire and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, now suddenly we're not asking them to be defenders first. We're asking them to be ball players. We're asking them to be progressive. We're asking them to play on the halfway line or beyond. In Aaron Wan-Bissaka's case, we're asking him to be a creative outlet. They weren't asked to do this when they first signed. So fundamentally, I would actually say, well, maybe that is on the board, because if we had a set identity, or if we had a position that set the identity, regardless of who the manager is, then the players would be more likely to be set up for success. Not on every occasion, but I think it would be more likely rather than not.
I think where I sort of look at it in regards to, I sit here and, again, I've been a player. The player comes off the field, he never points a finger deep in his heart. Will never look, that was the manager's fault or that was the board's fault after a loss or a draw or a poor performance. The players know it's on the players. However, where I do sympathise with some of the players, and okay, it's not all their fault, I do have to sort of direct the finger upstairs to the ownership, is in regards to look at the different type of managers we've had post Alex Ferguson. Now, obviously, sometimes something's not going to work and you're going to learn from that and you're going to go in a different direction. I understand that. But David Moyes, Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, Solskjaer, now Ralf Rangnick, and then going into maybe a Ten Hag or a Pochettino, 5, 6, 7, I don't know how many there are, completely different types of managers. And you just have to look at the tools at your disposal and trying to think of look, Imad there, I was trying to think of an analogy, and Imad a couple of weeks ago came and sort of fixed an awning at my place, put an awning up. And I'm just thinking, you can almost relate that to Manchester United. Woeful analogy, maybe, but let's think of 2 tools he would have used to install the awning. Let's say a ladder and a drill. The 2 things he definitely needed to do. If I supplied him with a bar stool with a wonky leg and a mallet, would he perform the job to the same ability? No. So when Fred misplaces a pass, I'm not comparing him to a wonky bar stool, but if Fred sort of misplaces a pass,
he can be.
Yeah, I'm going to blame Fred. Yeah, because that's where my frustration will be. That's what I visibly see. But why are we providing the manager with players like that?
Well, but again, this comes down to my point. Yes, the players are not good enough, and I cannot disagree with you there. The evidence is there. We see week to week. But fundamentally, the issue is Manchester United put themselves in a position where they can't sell players. We pay a ridiculous wage for players who don't deserve it. And
I think that's that contract situation you bring up there is interesting in regards to, now, obviously, every club is going to have a player sort of towards the end of their contract. That's naturally going to happen. But you look at Manchester United, and it's so prevalent, like the big names all coming to the end of their contract, or in situations where they're on a contract and they just simply can't be sold. And I remember when I was playing, I was signed for this club, and a lot of us actually signed quite big win bonuses. sort of were on, okay, you get paid this much for a win, this much for a draw, this much for a loss. And we started winning a lot of games. And ultimately, the money didn't come through and we weren't getting paid. And it caused conflict. Like you think, and then when we weren't getting paid, we still had the best team in the league. But ultimately, we weren't happy. Training were coming in, and we weren't there for the money. We were there to play. But ultimately, that took its toll. So we were going into training, we had a conflict with this person or that person, and focus was elsewhere. It wasn't solely on winning football matches. We were sort of a little bit distracted. And ultimately, we just kept losing games after that, after our winning streak. And I'm just thinking here, these things, when Bruno misplaces a pass or Rashford misplaces a shot, you think, okay, that's execution of skill, but all these sort of external factors behind the scenes ultimately do play a part. You think they shouldn't. Okay, you should be able to hit the penalty, miss a penalty. You should be able to hit the target from 12 yards. These things in regards to preparing yourself throughout the week, they do take its toll on a player's performance. You think it wouldn't, but trust me, it does.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Tom. If we look at the case, you and I discussed this on the last video about Cristiano Ronaldo. Is there a case of Bruno and Rashford not playing to their natural games because they're trying to give the ball to Ronaldo? He's the superstar. He's the ego. He's the box office. He's the one who needs to score the goals. Now, I'm sure Ronaldo is not the one telling them that, but I feel that whether that's the manager, whether that's a director of football, someone in that football department needs to be aware that these are the risks when you sign a certain profile of player. Now, if these are the things that are not being accounted for, now I also hear the argument, and I've heard Gary Neville say this sort of thing. If you can get a great striker, you go get them. If you can get Harry Kane, you go get Harry Kane. If you can get Luka Modric, you go get Luka Modric. Well, I actually disagree with that. I think you have to look at, where do I want this team to go? The players that are currently there, who are the ones I want to build my squad around? And if those players are in my starting 11 more weeks than they're not, like a Marcus Rashford, like a Bruno Fernandes, if I'm bringing Cristiano Ronaldo in, well, yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo scores goals. I understand that. Does the system we play take away from those two attributes of those two players? If the answer is yes, then maybe you have to weigh against signing a Cristiano Ronaldo.
Well, in regards to players who perform, you do look at it, and let's say Scott McTominay apparently on 30 or 40 grand a week, and some other players are on over 100 grand a week. So that is something they do need to sort out. Okay, someone's next contract, Paul Pogba's next contract's only 500 grand a week. Well, if Scott McTominay's performing better than him and earning 400,000 less or 300,000 less, that ultimately, you might not think it will, but ultimately that will take its toll, and players will say, hang on, why is he earning this much? And it's something they do need to get on top of, but unfortunately an issue like that won't be solved overnight. That does take its time. I just seen here, Matt saying since Ralf has joined the club, no other team has created more chances than Man United. I saw that, and I think sometimes a little bit misleading. Corners are created chances. We've had 10,000 corners we can't score from. Bruno crossing the ball from halfway is a created chance. So I think in terms of, we need to get into a little bit of context on what type of chances are being created. That stat can be a little misleading. I think in regards to when they dissected that and the clear-cut chances, I think it was around 12th or 13th we were in the league, not total chances created. Anything else, sorry, before we move on?
I mean, I look at the Watford game. I mean, that game in isolation is, you could say it's unfortunate. I think on another day, Ronaldo scores the one where he hits the post. Like, so unfortunate. If that goes in, it's a different game, right? But I think it's just one of those things where when you look at the context of the season, we've been getting those sorts of results constantly, particularly since Ralf Rangnick's taken over. Where I have to give credit to Ralf Rangnick is, and I think, look, Tom, it's obviously a natural transition into the manager. Since I've brought up the German, I'll just roll with it here and I'll make this point. Since Ralf has come in, we're definitely conceding much less goals and we look more solid defensively. I don't think we look perfect, and I think that's ultimately down to the personnel, but you can't deny he's made an improvement. I think we look better with the ball. I think we look more solid, more compact defensively, albeit not perfect, like I just said. And I think, like the stats will suggest, we are creating more chances. Now, you look at the likes of Manchester City, Liverpool, those sorts of matches earlier this season at Old Trafford. Now, those are a little bit different. But overall, you have to say that the performances, particularly since we've reverted to this 4-3-3 formation, has been there. Now, does Ralf Rangnick take some blame for the level of result? Absolutely, he does. He's the manager. Ultimately, he's picking the players. And there was a time where he was going with the 4-2-2 and a 4-4-2, and we were getting dominated in midfield. He has to take responsibility for that. But where I will give him credit, and where I suppose Ole Gunnar Solskjaer fell on his sword, Ole stuck to, no matter what was failing him, he was going to die on that hill. He chose that. Ralf Rangnick, in I guess contrast, has been willing to adjust, can see when something's not working, and has been willing to try something a little bit different. I'm telling you, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the manager position. I wouldn't be opposed to Ralf Rangnick sticking around another season if we can't get our first choice. I think he's shown enough that shows if you get the right player with the right personality that fits the system, I think you could see a positive run of results under the German.
Yeah, no, in terms of, you're completely right in saying we are more solid and both going forward and defensively. Maybe stats don't show that in regards to goals conceded and against. I don't have in regards to that. But we do look a better team. Now, ultimately, I don't care about looking like a better team. I want better results. The results probably haven't been as bad as we think they've been. I think we've only lost one game in the league since Ralf Rangnick came in. We're still in the Champions League, unfortunately, out of the FA Cup. But I think we're a lot harder to beat. And look, that was a bad thing under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. We were quite easy to beat at times. You just look at those last couple of games. Obviously, Manchester City and Liverpool, who we have coming up. But again, that Watford one, who could imagine losing 4-1 to Watford? But under Solskjaer, we got to that stage where that was the case. Just want to bring this last point in. I know I don't want to go too far into it because I know Imad's trying to get a reaction out of us talking about Ronaldo when we're talking about the manager. But since he's now infamous interview, Ronaldo has only scored 1 goal and 0 assists. I remember when we signed him earlier, everyone was saying that he can't be benched. Ronaldo has to start if he's fit. You want to play Edison Cavani? Play Cavani. Please feel free to play Edison Cavani. Is he in Manchester? You want to play the other Englishman? He's obviously not available. You want to play Marcus Rashford? Who are you going to play? I don't care. Anyone who doesn't want to play Ronaldo, you hate Ronaldo, fine. Valid opinion not to play him. Just tell me which striker instead. And you have it. I'll agree with you. Just tell me which striker you would play ahead of Ronaldo, and I'm all ears. Marcus Rashford's not the answer. I don't care. Do not play Marcus Rashford up front for Manchester United at the moment. I can't accept he scored 5 goals this season over Ronaldo's 15. That's not a valid argument. Mason, enough about him. He can't play. Edison Cavani's choosing not to play. Just give me an answer on who should play up front for Ronaldo.
Tom, that might be the wisest thing you've ever said on this show.
But that is the problem. Here we are. Forget the celebrity Ronaldo and what everything he stands for and the circus around him. He's a 37-year-old footballer. We shouldn't be relying on a 30. That's not Ronaldo's fault.
100%, mate. I cannot disagree. And that's the thing. Yes, he's going through a bad patch of form. Can he do better? Should he do better? Absolutely. When you forget 37, if you're 27 playing the amount of games he is, you're going to see a dip off. He's being played way too much, and he's just simply got no one to rotate with.
Well, Imad says, read the third comment here and say now he's in a bad patch. All of a sudden, we're running him into the ground. All of a sudden, no, it's fact. We're running him into the ground. Has he played more games than anyone this season? Maybe De Gea's played more?
He made the comment that, and he's referring to earlier in the season. Now, you and I didn't say this, so that's my first caveat and argument. The point Imad's making here is the argument at the start of the season. I remember at the Everton game when Martial started over Ronaldo. That was Sir Alex Ferguson got caught on camera with Khabib and basically said, you play your best players. Well, Sir Alex Ferguson rotated his best players. Sir Alex Ferguson rotated Ronaldo. So I think it was in the context of the season where he thought, you shouldn't be bringing Ronaldo off. So even then, and you have to rotate your best player. You always have to rotate your players, Imad, no matter who it is. And this is to anyone who says, Ronaldo's playing poorly. Rashford, Bruno, we don't rotate any of our players. Last season, Bruno Fernandes ran into the ground. By the end of the season, United couldn't put a fit team out there because Ole Gunnar Solskjaer ran the whole squad into the ground. Harry Maguire was out injured for the Europa League final. Case in point, you got to have a good squad to rotate players.
Well, George brings up the point here, Bruno as well. And look, Bruno and Ronaldo almost go in the same category at the moment in terms of underperforming a little bit. Well, in saying that, no one was saying Bruno was underperforming when he scored away at Ellen Road against Leeds the other day. But in terms of, I've been here saying play Juan Mata over Bruno Fernandes.
Would you play Bruno at striker? Is that an option? Look, I think in a false 9 system, you could do something.
Not to move forward. Not to move forward as a club. If Cavani's not available, Rashford's not available, you want to rest Ronaldo, or he's not sort of performing, and you need to sort of drop him. Okay, last case scenario in an emergency, put Bruno Fernandes up front and change the system. Going forward, no, buy a striker. We need a 22, 23-year-old striker. Bruno's not the answer there, but we will move on. And look, in regards to the Ronaldo debate, I'm sure we'll be having plenty of debates like that in the future. I know Emad and Adam had a good episode on their podcast the other day about. I'm sure we'll sort of be back at the pub in a couple of weeks. I think United have an early kickoff. It might be against Everton towards maybe about a month's time. I'm sure that debate will continue long into the night at the pub. If you are in Sydney and want to join the Man United Supporters Club, the link is in the description below. It'd be great to have you down there with us. But sort of moving on, Larry, and that's all about the players. And as I said, from the months of, say, August to May, we will only look at the players. However, in those other months, we always say, well, next season, when this season's over and it ultimately finishes in disappointment, Glazers out will return. Glazers out, but when we're calling Glazers out in the off-season and they're bringing Jadon Sancho, Rafael Varane and Cristiano Ronaldo in, we all get excited, but we all say deep down, well, this will silence everyone up because there was protests outside Old Trafford, green and gold until the club's sold. Okay, not going to buy any shirts. The Glazers out need to go. These signings won't sort of... They'll paper over the cracks. The problems will still be there. They're only signing Ronaldo for the PR. We all know these things behind the scenes. We all sort of feel these things. Ultimately, when a ball's kicked, we put the Glazers out to the side. So I'm just thinking, we've talked about players having to take responsibility. The board and the owners need to take responsibility. Fans, do we actually maybe hold the key? Do we need to take responsibility and start taking action? Because we've seen, I feel powerless as a fan, but ultimately we did see, and I don't know what big of an impact they did have, but ultimately I think they did have quite an impact. You saw what the fans did when the European Super League was about to kick off. Fans did have an impact there. So I'm thinking, is maybe the fan base just too big for Manchester United in regards to not going to... I'm not saying not go to games, of course. I'm not saying that's the case. But do Manchester United fans have a responsibility worth sort of going forward with in regards to making change at the club, or is the club just too big that... What's a fan? Okay, someone who goes to the game or someone who watches the game on the other side of the world, they're just as valuable to the club.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Look, can I be honest? I understand the protests against the Glazers, and look, I'm no fan of Joel and Avram myself, but what I will say is I do think the club is setting up a good football structure. I know there are a lot of, I know particularly on YouTube as well, there has been a lot of commentary that says the Glazers only won top four. I genuinely do not believe that, Tom. And the reason I say that is if that's all that they're striving for, they could have argued, well, we finished second last season. We don't need to buy Varane, Sancho, and Ronaldo. So I think they are striving to get to the top of the Premier League. Now, you can argue that in the years of beyond 2005, yes, of course, there was underinvestment, and I'm with you in that. But again, I refer to what I said at the start of the video. They've appointed a sporting director in John Murtaugh. Now, is John Murtaugh best in class? No. He hasn't done anything in the game that would make me suggest that or fill me with confidence that he's going to set Manchester United up for success. They've appointed Darren Fletcher to help him out. They've done some sort of revamp of the scouting network. They've brought in Matt.
Do you believe we have though? You talk about this restructuring. Okay, we'll put Murtaugh, we'll put Fletcher, we've done scouting. Do you believe we have?
Well, we have. It was literally John Murtaugh who appointed Ralf Rangnick as the interim manager. He was the one responsible for the recruitment of that role. So you have to say that yes, that position is doing what it's.
But we're going to sign a manager anyway. If we didn't sign Ralf Rangnick and Matt Judge was there, Matt Judge might have signed someone. But we're going to sign someone.
I take your point, Tom, but my point is I don't think if that was solely up to Ed Woodward, I don't think it'd be Ralf Rangnick. I think you got someone who's a football man looking for who was the best football manager to take that position. Now, whether you agree with the Ralf Rangnick appointment or not, it's a different debate. But my point is, by having a football person in there who can actually have some discretion to exercise, we were able to get a football manager, someone who has achieved something in the game. Okay, so what I would argue, and I got to be honest, and this is something we haven't touched on. I don't know if this was some sort of conference call or like quarters press conference, Manchester
Little
United.
Fan forum.
It was the fan forum. Well, I just want to read out some of the quotes to you here by Richard Arnold. Here we go. We have a clear vision and we're implementing a strategy to win with an empowered leadership team to drive that forward. We will foster a culture of excellence through world-class football environment. And then John Murtaugh, this point is crucial for me. We know that consistency is key as we strive for a top four finish this season. I want to reiterate, however, that this is not the ultimate objective for Manchester United. And everyone at the club is focused on challenging for the top trophies. So obviously they hear this commentary that the Glazers only want top four. Look, I truthfully believe that United do want more. Now, are they set up in a way to achieve that? Look, I'm not too sure. And let me ask you this. We saw Ralf Rangnick at the under-18s Manchester United game with Paul Mitchell. He's a well-renowned football director, worked commonly with Tottenham. So what do you make of that?
Okay, yeah, I'm sure Ralf Rangnick wants to sort of implement Paul Mitchell into the club and get his thoughts and potentially give him a role. I want to sign Kylian Mbappe. Doesn't mean Manchester United are going to do it for me. Just because Ralf Rangnick wants Paul Mitchell or potentially wants Paul Mitchell at the club doesn't mean he's going to do it for him, or doesn't mean they're going to do it for him. So all these things, you read out those words from John Murtough, and I think, yeah, great. Well, I've heard those great words for 10 years. Whoever's in that role or whoever's talking on behalf of the club, I've heard those things. So, and look, I want to believe in John Murtough. I'm not sort of going to criticise him for those words, but ultimately, I do have to wait, and that's an unfortunate thing. You do have to be patient as a fan. You just have to wait to see if they do implement on that, because at the moment, and he might be 100% behind those words and do everything he can to sort of make that come to fruition. But ultimately, I've heard them before from other people. So just one of those things. I just sent a comment up here you brought up a little bit earlier. I just forgot to make the point Adam brings up here in regards to the Bruno one. Do we not get Donny van der Beek to rotate for Bruno? Potentially 100% yes. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer clearly didn't want Donny van der Beek, which is why he's on loan at Everton at the moment. And that goes back to the football structure. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted Jack Grealish. They didn't get Jack Grealish. They went for the second option in Donny van der Beek. The manager didn't want him. Ultimately, it didn't work. So, look, I completely agree. In my opinion, I would be rotating Donny van der Beek with Bruno Fernandes, maybe behind Juan Mata. But you know what I mean? But that, again, goes back to the football structure and the lack of structure. But sort of moving on, and yeah, Rob, to wrap up the podcast, Rob here saying, yeah, bullshit I've heard before in regards to those quotes. And again, those quotes, I want to believe them and I want to get behind and sort of give them the benefit of the doubt. But ultimately, I do need to see actions.
I agree with you. And that's the thing. I'm not saying that the Glazers are indefensible or they're doing a great job. Not at all. They're far from it. But what I'm saying is, with a new CEO now in, I'm willing to say the jury is out, as opposed to pull out the pitch knives and go for his head. I think we have to give Richard Arnold time to see what's he going to do. Are we going to see an improvement in terms of the scouting? Are we going to see an improvement in terms of the football identity, the way we recruit players, the type of players we recruit? But this will only be able to say that within 12, 18, 24 months' time.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we'll try and sort of wrap up the podcast here. So just maybe 1 or 2 minutes and make sure you do get your thoughts in the live chat. I'm sure this may be a topic for Friday Night Pint or even a Soul sort of video in future weeks. But obviously touch at the top of the podcast that Chelsea are up for sale now, officially up for sale. Ralf Rangnick. Roman Abramovich put out a statement on the Chelsea website saying he's going to sell the club. Okay, that's big for Chelsea. That's big for the Premier League. Ultimately, does it impact Manchester United? Because I still remember the day that he signed for Chelsea, that he took over Chelsea, was it back in 03-04, and the landscape of English football changed overnight. Like you think this Newcastle story was big a couple of weeks ago. That Newcastle story had absolutely nothing on what happened at Chelsea those couple of weeks, where they literally, Abramovich took over. Then within 2-3 days, they were signing world-class players for, back then, 5 million was a big, 5 million would get you an international player. 10 million would get you a top-of-the-line player. They went and spent 30, 40 million on sort of average Premier League players. So it was a very interesting time. And ultimately, you have to say, no matter what anyone's thoughts on how Chelsea are run as a football club in regards to sacking managers and everything, ultimately, they've been the most successful club since Roman Abramovich took over. In that period from 2004-05 to now, they have won more trophies than anyone, I believe. So I don't want to see my club run like Chelsea. I don't like it. But ultimately, in regards to success, it's hard to argue with it. So just ultimately, again, before Russia and Ukraine sort of happened, or the immediate conflict has happened, we never saw this coming a couple of weeks ago. Ultimately, it has come, and the football or Chelsea's landscape does look a lot different at the moment.
It does, and it's the great unknown now with Chelsea Football Club, isn't it? I guess we don't know these new buyers. Will they put the level of investment that Roman Abramovich has? You'd have to suggest not. So it'll be very interesting to see.
Do you think Chelsea, though, are now
impacted by this?
A lot of people are saying, okay, Chelsea are finished because they don't have Roman Abramovich. Chelsea are a very different club now to the one Roman bought. So do you think now, unless they get a horrible owner who just does whatever with the club, do you think now, I hate to say it, but they are classed as a big club now, Chelsea? In my opinion, I don't have them in that big club, but ultimately they are business-wise and stature. Do you think they'll be okay now just because of the way they are run?
Look, it's hard to say, Tom. I mean, it's just one of the unknowns. At the end of the day, Roman Abramovich has put a lot of his own money into that club in terms of the signings they've made. Was it last season they spent £200 million and then this season forking out a record transfer fee for Romelu Lukaku. It's very hard to say. I think when you're backed by a billionaire who's willing to invest their own money into the football club, it's a different kettle of fish. Now, in theory, the Glazers could do the same thing. They never do that. So until the new owner is got his feet under the table, we'll simply just not know.
Yeah. Adam here saying it will be interesting how it affects the team. Do you think that will? Because obviously Roman Abramovich does have a little bit of a relationship with the players. We talk about here the board affecting Manchester United players. Could we see this at a little bit of sort of turmoil at Chelsea, potentially
not
impacting
for this season? I don't think. I imagine for the rest of this season it won't be an issue. At the end of the day, he is still there right now. He'll be there until they find a buyer. So we just have to wait and see. I can't imagine it impacts them this season. It's still a world-class squad. It's still a world-class manager. And until those things change, I still think they'll finish comfortably in the top 3.
Well, my mum is also in the chat, and she's brought up here, and I'll just throw a little question to you, Larry. It's about time for another trivia night. I'm just thinking a little bit of trivia. When Roman Abramovich came in, 2 people went from Manchester United to Chelsea. Do we know who they are?
I wouldn't have a clue.
One was Sebastian Veron, obviously big money signing, obviously didn't work out well. I think he was good at Manchester United, but he also went to Chelsea as one of their first.
Romelu
what went from United when Roman Abramovich brought over? Like United was the Invincibles at Arsenal, but Veron went to Chelsea, but also Peter Kenyon. And I just bring that up. Let's say a new owner comes in. If a new owner comes in, does Ed Woodward look for a new job in London?
Oh, you're mental.
But you think what Chelsea want? Like, okay, Chelsea have the success. If a new owner comes in with a new direction, could you see a situation? Peter Kenyon went to Chelsea. Could you see a situation where because we hate Ed Woodward. Looking what he does off the pitch in terms of the commerciality, which Chelsea, so that's probably the next step they want to take. It's an appealing job for him.
I can't see it. I mean, the fact that he's just got such a close association with the Glazers, I can't see that.
Oh, yeah, no, it's just, I don't know why I brought it up. I just remember when Peter Kenyon went with Roman Abramovich and one Sebastian Veron, which a lot of people have made the point here, Veron, and he had Lukaku. I don't know where Lukaku was at the time, probably a little bit before his time. But take me back to those times. Well, that was almost the start of United's, wouldn't say downfall, but we had a really sort of bad patch when Roman Abramovich came in. Well, obviously went 3 years without winning the title, but then Sir Alex got it round and we did win 3 titles on the bounce, including a Champions League. And Rob here is saying Chelsea aren't that stupid. I agree, but you don't know who this new owner is. And again, the new owner might be great and that'll be unfortunate for us and good for Chelsea, but ultimately you don't know. There's only a handful of people who can buy football clubs at that level.
Let me make this point to you, Tom. If an owner comes in and spends $2.5 billion to buy a club, are they then going to go and spend another $200 million investing into the football squad? Can't see it. You saw what happened with Arsenal and Highbury.
What do you make of the? And look, we've had this discussion a little bit earlier. Do we want to sort of bring in politics into a sort of football discussion? And this is a debate for another day. So I don't want to get into this too deep. But Roman Abramovich's statement talking about sort of funding or sort of proceeds, which if you actually dissect it, there won't actually be many proceeds because he is going to collect on that debt. I don't buy that PR statement. What do you make of that statement in regards to saying that he's going to be funding the Ukraine? He's not going to take any profits because he's owed, I think, £1.5 billion. He's not going to just say no to that and sort of fund it to Ukraine relief. If anyone buys that statement, they're silly.
He's just trying to keep face, Tom. It's well known he's got some sort of association with Putin. They've done some level of business together. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but he is known to Vladimir Putin. And look, what's happening over there is an absolute travesty. The fact that he is even in this position tells you the level of involvement he must have. So, I mean, there's
no doubt this is a quick escape plan.
Oh, 100%. And that's the thing. He's obviously been informed by his lawyers that he needs to sell the football club. So make of that what you will. We obviously don't know the situation. Yeah, and I agree with Matt here. I saw Tuchel's comment to the press the other day, and I have to agree with him. The fact that the press, and that's another thing, the press keep relentlessly pressing these managers to comment. Like I saw Ralf Rangnick. Now Ralf handled it fairly well. I don't understand that. I really don't understand that. Tuchel is employed by Abramovich. What do you want him to say? He hates Russia. Come on.
It will be interesting, but a debate for another day because whatever happens at Chelsea will impact the Premier League, will impact Manchester United, and as I said, a big issue at Manchester United is our ownership. So we'll see what Chelsea do, how it affects them, and hopefully Manchester United can sort of learn. We haven't learned in the past. Adam is his wife a bit. So it's a fascinating situation, but I do like that. That's Chelsea done if they get sold. It'll be interesting, ugly, but look, fingers crossed. But ultimately, I think they've got to the stage now where they are a big club, not in stature, but nor not in terms of history, but financially, and the players they can attract, they are. So I think they might be fine. But that is a debate for another day. Obviously, we'll be back most likely tomorrow night, a bit of a Friday night pint, and sadly, Larry, I say this sadly, a Manchester preview. I'm not looking forward to the Manchester derby this week. Are you?
It's not going to be pretty, mate.
3:30 on a Monday morning as well.
Yeah, it's brutal. But look, maybe they surprise us. If
I saw a good tweet saying it was from a Manchester City fan talking about had Manchester City players celebrating time for our annual training session at the Etihad against Manchester United. Then the reply was, "You've won once at the Etihad since 2014 against Man United." We have a fantastic record there.
Yeah, we do. But that's under the former manager. Now, whatever you thought of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he found a way to get a lift and a performance at the Etihad. Now, all the suggestions we've seen under Ralf Rangnick against one big side, that being at Atletico Madrid, not good precedents to go off, Tom. So we'll wait and see. And what I'm really interested to see is, will Ralf Rangnick adapt his style of play? We're not going to dominate possession against them. So is Ralf going to look to change his philosophy and actually hit them on the counter-attack? Or will he be stubborn and try to go toe-to-toe with Manchester City? If it's the latter, I'll be very scared for what the score will be. The other thing will be whether he plays Harry Maguire. Look, you can make of it what you will. I think he was dropped. So let's wait and see. But obviously, I look forward to seeing your preview tomorrow. And your starting 11 as well, I might add.
Yeah, well, this is probably one game I probably won't even for the tongue-in-cheek. I probably won't include one matter in this one. I'll try and do it as serious as I can. And probably the game I wouldn't be playing one matter anyway. So there's a little bit of a spoiler. But as I said, join us for a drink tomorrow night. We'll definitely need one to get through the Manchester preview, but a bit of a Friday night point. So hopefully join us. I wouldn't be going toe-to-toe with Manchester City at the moment. But fair play, man. Look, who knows? But yeah, who'd Manchester City? Oh, it was Peterborough. They've been in the FA Cup, so I'm sure they rested everyone. But as I said, we'll be back tomorrow night for a bit of a preview. Make sure you do join us. We'll definitely need a little bit of help with that. But until then, Larry, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, everyone in the chat, interacting. Plenty of different opinions today, but obviously always all in very good spirits. And we all sort of know most of it is 99% of the time sort of tongue-in-cheek and all very respectful, which we do appreciate. And until that thought, just for Imad, Viva Ronaldo. Larry, any more thoughts?
Viva Ronaldo indeed. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure if you are new that you do hit that subscribe button as well. And look, Tom, I feel like I'm just going to let it out. I know you know this, obviously. We are working on a little bit of a rebranding. Little rebranding, can I call it that? Is that?
I don't know. This is news to me. Talk to me.
Talk to you. Might be having a little bit of a facelift on the good old YouTube. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Now, as always, do appreciate everyone's support. As I said, please leave a like on the video on your way out, and we'll see you this time tomorrow night. Cheers.